Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be in Leviticus chapter 4, verse 1, through chapter 5, verse 19. Oh. Then the Lord spoke to Moses. Tell the Israelites, when a person sins by straying unintentionally from any of the Lord's commandments, which must not be violated, and violates any one of them, if the high priest sins so that the people are guilty, on account of the sin he has committed, he must present a flawless young bull to the Lord for sin offering. He must bring the bull to the entrance of the tent, to the meeting tent before the Lord, lay his hand on the head of the bull, and slaughter the bull before the Lord. Then that high priest must take some of the blood of the bull and bring it to the meeting tent. The priest must dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord, toward the front of the veil canopy of the sanctuary. The priest must put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense that is before the Lord in the meeting tent, and all the rest of the bull's blood he must pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering that is at the entrance of the meeting tent. Then he must take up all the fat from the sin offering bull, the fat covering the entrails, and all the fat surrounding the entrails, the 2 kidneys with the fat on their sinews, and the protruding lobe on the liver, which he is to remove along with the kidneys, just as it is taken from the ox of the peace offering sacrifice, and the priest must offer them up in smoke on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull, all its flesh, along with its head and its legs, its entrails and its dung, all the rest of the bull, he must bring outside the camp to a ceremonially clean place, to the fatty ash pile, and he must burn it on a wood fire. It must be burned on the fatty ash pile. If the whole congregation of Israel strays unintentionally, and the matter is not noticed by the assembly, and they violate one of the Lord's commandments, which must not be violated, so they become guilty, the assembly must present a young bull for a sin offering. When the sin they have committed becomes known, they must bring it before the meeting tent. The elders of the congregation must lay their hands on the head of the bull before the Lord, and someone must slaughter the bull before the Lord. Then the high priest must bring some of the blood of the bull to the meeting tent, and that priest must dip his finger in the blood, and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord toward the front of the veil canopy. He must put some of the blood on the horns of the altar, which is before the Lord in the meeting tent, and all the rest of the blood he must pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, that is at the entrance of the meeting tent. Then the priest must take all its fat, and offer the fat up in smoke on the altar. He must do with the rest of the bull, just as he did with the bull of the sin offering. This is what he must do with it. So the priest will make atonement on their behalf, and they will be forgiven. He must bring the rest of the bull outside the camp, and burn it just as he burned the first bull. It is the sin offering of the assembly. Whenever a leader, by straying unintentionally, sins and violates one of the commandments of the Lord, his God, which must not be violated, and he pleads guilty, or his sin that he committed is made known to him, he must bring a flawless male goat as his offering. He must lay his hand on the head of the male goat and slaughter it in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest must take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and he must pour out the rest of its blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering. Then the priest must offer up all its fat and smoke on the altar, like the fat of the peace offering sacrifice. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf for his sin, and he will be forgiven. If an ordinary individual sins by straying unintentionally when he violates one of the Lord's commandments, which must not be violated, and he pleads guilty, or his sin that he committed is made known to him, he must bring a flawless female goat as his offering for the sin that he committed. He must lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slaughter the sin offering in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest must take some of its blood with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and he must pour out all the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. Then he must remove all of its fat, Just as fat was removed from the peace offering sacrifice, and the priest must offer it up in smoke on the altar for a soothing aroma to the Lord. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf, and he will be forgiven. But if he brings a sheep as his offering for a sin offering, he must bring a flawless female. He must lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it for a sin offering in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered. Then the priest must take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and he must pour out all the rest of its blood at the base of the altar. Then the one who brought the offering must remove all its fat, just as the fat of the sheep is removed from the peace offering sacrifice, and the priest must offer them up in smoke on the altar on top of the other gifts of the Lord. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf for a sin which he has committed, and he will be forgiven. When a person sins in that he hears a public curse against one who fails to testify and he is a witness, he either saw or knew what had happened and he does not make it known, then he will bear his punishment for iniquity. Or when there is a person who touches anything ceremonially unclean, whether the carcass of an unclean wild animal, or the carcass of an unclean domesticated animal, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing, even if he did not realize it, but he himself has become unclean and is guilty, or when he touches human uncleanness with regard to anything by which he can become unclean, even if he did not realize it, but he himself has later come to know it and is guilty, or when a person swears an oath, speaking thoughtlessly with his lips, whether to do evil or to do good, with regard to anything which the individual might speak thoughtlessly in an oath, even if he did not realize it, but he himself has later come to know it, and is guilty with regards to one of these oaths. When an individual becomes guilty with regard to one of these things, he must confess how he has sinned, and he must bring his penalty for guilt to the Lord for his sin that he has committed, a female from the flock, whether a female sheep or a female goat, for a sin offering. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf for a sin. If he cannot afford an animal from the flock, he must bring his penalty for guilt for his sin that he has committed, 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, to the Lord, one for a sin offering and one for a burnt offering. He must bring them to the priest and present first the one that is for sin offering. The priest must pinch its head at the nape of its neck, but must not sever the head from the body. Then he must sprinkle some of the blood of the sin offering on the wall of the altar, and the remainder of the blood must be squeezed out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. The second bird he must make a burnt offering, according to the standard regulation. So the priest will make atonement on behalf of this person for a sin which he has committed, and he will be forgiven. If he cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, he must bring as his offering for a sin which he has committed 1/10 of an ephah of choice wheat flour for a sin offering. He must not place olive oil on it, and he must not put frankincense on it, because it is a sin offering. He must bring it to the priest, and the priest must scoop out from it a handful as its memorial portion, and offer it up in smoke on the altar on top of the other gifts of the Lord. It is a sin offering. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf for his sin which he has committed by doing one of these things, and he will be forgiven. The remainder of the offering will belong to the priest, like the grain offering. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, when a person commits a trespass and sins by straying unintentionally from the regulations about the Lord's holy things, then he must bring his penalty for guilt to the Lord, a flawless ram from the flock, convertible into silver shekels according to the standard of the sanctuary shekel, for a guilt offering. And whatever holy thing he violated, he must restore and must add 1/5 to it and give it to the priest. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf with the guilt offering ram, and he will be forgiven. If a person sins and violates any of the Lord's commandments, which must not be violated, although he did not know it at the time, but later realizes he is guilty, then he will bear his punishment for iniquity, and must bring a flawless ram from the flock, convertible into silver shekels, for a guilt offering to the priest. So the priest will make atonement on his behalf for his error, which he committed, although he himself had not known it, and he will be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He was surely guilty before the Lord. Okay. Leviticus. A little bit difficult to read, but I guess as I was reading through it this morning, it kind of struck me how these offerings that are being offered up in chapter 4 are for sinning unintentionally. Um, you didn't intend to sin that way, but there were still consequences for the sin, despite being ignorant of that it was a sin, and pretty big consequences too. I mean, you've got the sacrifice of an animal, this spreading of blood on stuff. Like in particular, the high priest, it looks like he has to re-sanctify the altar um, if he sins unintentionally. Yeah, but so I guess my point in all that is that our sin has consequences, and it affects more than just us. Mark chapter 2, verse 13, through chapter 3, verse 6. Jesus went out again by the sea. The whole crowd came to him, and he taught them. And he went along. As he went along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth. "Follow me," he said to him. And he got up and followed him. As Jesus was having a meal in Levi's home, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the experts in the law and the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are healthy don't need a physician, but those who are sick do. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Now, John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, so they came to Jesus and said, "Why did the disciples of John and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples don't fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they do not fast. But the days are coming when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and at that time they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, otherwise the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and the tear becomes worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the skins will be destroyed. Instead, new wine is poured into new wineskins." Jesus was going through the grain fields on a Sabbath, and his disciples began to pick some heads of wheat as they made their way. So the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is against the law on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need, and he and his companions were hungry? How he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest, and ate the sacred bread, which is against the law for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to his companions? Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. For this reason the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." Then Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched Jesus closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they could accuse him. So he said to the man who had the withered hand, stand up among all these people." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath, or evil, to save a life or to destroy it?" But they were silent. After looking around at them in anger, grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So the Pharisees went out immediately and began plotting with the Herodians as to how they could assassinate him. Nice, guys. Not overreacting at all. Oh boy, but do we justify things in our heads? I think sometimes we can get just so blinded by what we believe is true that We don't even hear what people say. Like Jesus asks them a question, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or evil, to save a life or to destroy it? And yeah. Yeah. If they could just think about it for 1 minute. Like what would God prefer? That oh, leave this man to suffer in his uh, illness, or and obey the Sabbath, or heal him and disobey the Sabbath, and yeah, so hmm. Okay, carrying on here, Psalm chapter 36, verses 1 through 12. An evil man is rebellious to the core. He does not fear God, for he is too proud to recognize and give up his sin. The words he speaks are sinful and deceitful. He does not care about doing what is wise and right. He plans ways to sin while he lies in bed. He is committed to a sinful lifestyle. He does not reject what is evil. O Lord, your loyal love reaches to the sky, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your justice is like the highest mountains, your fairness like the deepest sea. You preserve mankind in the animal kingdom. How precious is your loyal love, O God! The human race finds shelter under your wings. They are filled with food from your house, and you allow them to drink from the river of your delicacies. For you are the one who gives and sustains life. Extend your loyal love to your faithful followers, and vindicate the morally upright. Do not let arrogant men overtake me, or let evil men make me homeless. I can see the evildoers. They have fallen. They have been knocked down and are unable to get up. Yeah, I don't know. And just reading that after the whole bit with the Pharisees. An evil man is rebellious to the core. He does not fear God, for he is too proud to recognize and give up his sin. The Pharisees were pretty proud in their interpretations of Scripture and um, obeying the commands of the elders, and so they didn't consider that they were wrong. Proverbs chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise child makes a father rejoice, but a foolish child is a grief to his mother. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from mortal danger. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. Definitely appreciate it. Take care.